Because you're breathing here because of someone. So already, just because you're not conscious of it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're functioning without him. You're just functioning without the consciousness of him. And I think that's where we lose meaning, because we've lost consciousness of where our meaning actually comes from. We've decided to search for it in vain things, in futile things, in vapor things. And literally, it's like this. We don't care about this stuff, guys. We don't. Like, we may think we do. But we actually don't. Who cares about who lived 100 years ago? Who cares, really? Don't you think that the one who actually cares most about you is the one who created you? And whether you know who that person is or not, does it not matter for you to at least know who, or at your level maybe, I don't know what level you may be at, what that is? Wouldn't you want to know?
I'm taking a step forward to this life, there is nothing I'm owing. Do not play it safe, that's boring. Can't outside with me while it's pouring.
One of the biggest questions that I know a lot of people have is purpose. What is their purpose? What is purpose? I think it's a question that many people don't like to jump into because it's deep. No one really likes to, it's not one of those conversation starters, right? That question. Because people don't like to get deep. But let someone sit by themselves in their room, introspect. And at some point, that question arises. Like at some point, you kind of ask yourself, like, what was I made for? That Billie Eilish song, right? And she asks it, and even though she's, this big singer, well-renowned, she's a pop star, she's made it. Well, I don't know if pop star is the word, but she's a superstar, she's made it. That's still a song of hers. And whether that's a song she wrote before she started a career or now, it's a question that it's literally been in existence for existence. And people often ask that question as far as maybe their career. But even people who are well established in their careers ask themselves this question. And I think it's part of what birthed being. It wasn't so much me asking myself what my purpose is, but me asking myself, how can I be in this world? How am I, or who am I supposed to be in this world? How do I exist? How do I function in this world? Which pretty much validates the whole notion that your purpose is not in your career. It's more so that your career can subsidize, if that's the right word, your purpose, but your career itself is not your purpose. Who are you? And it's one of those very existential questions, very mystic for some people, too deep for, but we have to get to these deep questions, because in as much as we like simplicity and as much as we like keeping things shallow, not being too dramatic, it's the deep questions that keep the simplicity of life going. If you don't deal with the deep, all the simple things pretty much cease to exist, or they actually become much harder, right? The reason why you and I can live at the surface level of, I don't know, the reason why you and I can just put on a light switch and it seems like something so simple, just turn it on, is because of some deep-seated scientific, technological activity that's happening in the background of that of that light switch, the electricity that's happening over there. The deep keeps the simple going. Now, if you don't deal with your deep, if you don't tackle your deep, if you don't explore your deep, your simple is going to come crumbling down so fast and so easy. If you don't get to asking yourself those existential questions, if you think of yourself as merely just a concept, it sounds like an attack to a friend of mine who says this a lot. It really isn't. Then the simplicity of your life, you're simple. The ignorance that you live in will come crumbling down sooner and probably harder than you would have ever imagined, than you would have ever fathomed. You won't even see it coming. You won't even see it coming. And that's why this podcast exists. This podcast exists so that you can deal with the deep, deal with your being, perhaps understand to some level your being or your existence or why you are here, to some level, because I think that that's just something that, we continue to discover, so that you can exist simply, peacefully, organically, authentically in the world. So how do you find that being? How do you find the being for humanity as to what makes us human beings? And then how do you find your being? How do you function in your being? Your individual purpose. That's what we're here to discover. That's literally what we're here to discover. All right, let's shoot. I have this favorite book, right? This book happens to be in the Bible. Now, a lot of people, which is, it's true, of course, the Bible is a book in and of itself, right? But few people actually know that the Bible is a book of books, right? And that's something that I know that there are people who know it in theory or in hindsight, right? Oh yeah, Konje, it's a book of books, but really just practicalize that. Is that a word to me? Just make that practical for a bit, right? If somebody ever says to you, how many books have you read? And all you've ever read was the Bible, and you've read niblets, or maybe you've read like this book here, and you read honey, you've read at least 5 books, even if they were all found in the Bible, honey. Okay, so give yourself a young kudos. Amandala. So I've read quite a number of books in my lifetime, having read just one. Okay, to be honest, I haven't completed many books of the Bible. I literally I grab stories here and there. There's few that I can actually say I've completed, now that I think about it. Probably only 2. And it's like the shortest ones. One of the shortest ones. Anyways, my favorite book in the Bible. I get so excited talking about this book, guys. And it's actually what we're going to talk about today. My favorite book in the Bible is the book of Ecclesiastes. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I've said it that way my whole life, but here we are. It's the book of Ecclesiastes, right? To my knowledge, I think this was written by King Solomon, who has an amazing, amazing story. You guys should definitely read up on it. I'm not even done reading up on his story, but just what I found is amazing. He's known as like the wisest man ever to exist. God comes to him in a dream, asks him, yo, what do you want? Shows him amazing things like, oh, you want this Rari? You want this? And he's like, I want wisdom. I can't lie. I think I only say I want wisdom now because King Solomon made the right decision. I don't know, but personally speaking, I don't think that I would have chosen wisdom. I don't think I would have. Maybe I could have. Maybe now, knowing what I know, I would have. But I think really, shout out to him for choosing wisdom. Anyways, he picks wisdom, And then he turns out to be the wisest man to ever exist, really, you know. And because of that, God not only blesses him with what he asked for, but God blesses him with like extremely more. God blesses him with like a heck of a lot more than he ever asked for. The wealth galore. Like, I think he was even the wealthiest man in the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. So King Solomon is rich, guys, like rich, but rich in a lot, like rich in substance. Excuse me, in intellectual substance, in knowledge, in understanding and in wisdom. So you can imagine the bulk of insight this man has written in his lifetime, and you know, just the bulk of wisdom that he has to share with us. Just, you can imagine how much you can learn from him. He wasn't a perfect man. I mean, like, he made gang mistakes, you know. He's done a lot. Like, he was out here, like, let me not judge him, but he was doing the most, okay? Like, he was married and, can I say in the streets? But he was like a lot. He was a lot, right? But he was very wise. He was very wise. It's so interesting how even with all this wisdom, you can still fall because you are human, right? We're fallible. We're like, is it fallible or fallible? We're people. We're mankind. We're not God, right? We are created beings. We are imperfect, and all the more reason to need this God, which kind of touches on what I'm going to speak about today, right? So King Solomon writes the book of Ecclesiastes. To my knowledge, he also wrote the book of Proverbs. So they kind of, I think they write next to each other, if I'm not mistaken. So the Bible is full of numerous books, right? And there are 3 books known as the wisdom literature, right? And that's the book of Job, the book of Proverbs, and the book of Ecclesiastes. King Solomon wrote 2 of those 3. And in the one, he's a lot more simplistic in that you do this, you get that. You don't do this, you don't get that. It's kind of like a tit for tat kind of book, right? How to live. And it's actually very practical, right? But then the book of Ecclesiastes is a slightly, I don't want to say cynical, but pretty close, right? And maybe that's why I like it. There's a lot of realism in this book. There's something very realistic about this book. In fact, the most cynical person, maybe the most cynical Christian or the most cynical non-Christian, just a cynical person, would probably find that book a lot more validating, because I won't even say maybe even the more pessimistic person may find that book a little more validating. I'm not saying that it's holistically a pessimistic book, but it's very realistic in the sense that sometimes life isn't as black and white. There are a lot of gray areas in life. Sometimes life isn't, you get this and then this happens. It's not always a tit for tat kind of thing. And it questions a lot about life. Like, a lot of the questions that we have, a lot of the questions that even Christians have, religious people, whoever, have that they're afraid of asking, are in that book, because maybe they're afraid of offending God. Like, he doesn't already know what you're thinking, right? And so that's the book that we're going to touch on today. I really, really fell in love with this book because the first thing that I saw in this book, I think I was around maybe the ages of, I think I was like 21 or 20 when I came across this book. I was living in Soweto with my cousin, Pumzile, shout out. We were like those people who, guys, thought-provoking, very critical, always wanting to know more, like reading a lot, researching a lot, YouTubing a lot. Like, there was a lot, right, going on in that house with just the 2 of us. And with this well of wisdom, you think that we were like rich or ballers or like extreme high-end scholars. We really weren't. We were just very like intrigued seekers. And I came across this book. I was so shocked to come across it. I was a very, like, I want to say normal Christian. Like, you know, you read the Psalms, you read the cute books. Like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. For God so loved the world. You know, all those ones. And then I come across the book of Ecclesiastes. And the first thing I read in that book, I don't even know how I came across it. First thing I read in that book are the words, meaningless, meaningless. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. I could not have grabbed a book quicker. I was like, wait, what? What? Meaningless? Then why are you here? Like, why am I even reading this book? Why am I here? What's the point of existence? Like, I had so many questions. What you guys are seeing right now is a huge, what's the opposite of exaggeration? Like, it's an underestimation of my actual reaction, my internal reaction. I was like pretty much boiling inside. I was like, Mudimu, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So there's no meaning in life. Is that what you're trying to say to me? It's almost, I think it's what pulled me to the book so much. In fact, firstly, I paged through to see just how long the book was. It's like 5 chapters. And I was like, you had me at 5 chapters, firstly. Asibonge, hallelujah, amen. And then meaningless, because I really wanted to know what this author meant to say. Especially since the person who wrote this book wrote the book of Proverbs, which I think is about like 30 to 31 chapters, and it's just a bunch of meaning in life. Like, the wisest man ever lived has the audacity to say that everything is meaningless. If you are that wise, my hand, I want to know. I really want to know where you got that from. And I think I wanted to know how he got to that conclusion, especially since I was always asking, what's the point of life? What's the meaning of life? What's my meaning? What's my being? Why am I here? What was I made for? Billie Eilish. All of that. We all want to know what meaning is, right? To me, I think humanity is a group of people who are on a constant quest for meaning. We always want to find meaning in things, even if we don't do it consciously. Our subconscious is consistently searching for purpose, for meaning, for the understanding of our being. Science always does this. We always want to know, what's this, what's that. We weren't just okay with the fact of knowing that we are here. We want to know, okay, but how did we get here, right? We want to know, we weren't just okay with the fact that what goes up must come down. We were like, okay, but what's that? What is this thing called gravity? And then fine, we identify it as gravity. And then what's its point? What does it do? Okay, but why? What will happen if it doesn't? We always want to know why. We want to find out meaning. And then this person has the audacity to say, meaningless, everything is meaningless, utterly meaningless. My babe, you have my attention. There you definitely have my attention. So, of course, I read on. And what I thought would be a very depressing book, actually, and maybe for some people it may just be depressing. For me, it was just I was like, somebody gets me, right? It made me feel like I was okay. For number one, asking all the questions I've always had, but I've been afraid to ask myself, ask God, and then of course ask people. And then 2, it made me okay with not knowing all the answers. Now, I'll have you know, I'm a seeker, and so I want answers, right? And so I will do best to know everything. But I also know that I can't know everything to a certain level. There's a point where the moment I know everything, I think that's literally where I meet God, like this. And then I cease to exist. What's the point of me being here? Now I know everything. Like, it's like, So while I'm still here, while I'm still maybe in battle with my flesh and my mind, or my flesh and my spirit, I am okay with not knowing everything, or knowing that the answers will come in due time. So I don't always have to be so stuck in not knowing. So in exploring being, in exploring understanding, and I promise you this has a huge connection with how you be or become or are in this world, how you go about. In understanding being, I'd like us to jump into the book of Ecclesiastes. I don't think we're definitely not going to do this in one episode, but I'd like us to just touch on a bit of chapter 1, just for us to gain some kind of meaning, not just for humanity, but even for ourselves. So, shout out to the Bible. One of my favorite things about it is the various translations, right? I know sometimes it's actually not so great because people kind of stick with one translation and then they go, okay, that's that. And then they're like, okay, so then it contradicts a lot of things. Or people find the various translations as a contradiction in and of itself, right? They're like, but why there's so many translations? Just give me one and that's that. But people don't really understand the I want to say like the meat, the food, the value in having various translations. Because at the end of the day, we're all people and multiple personality people. Not to say that you have multiple personalities in yourself, but like we all receive things differently, and we all speak different languages. We come from different cultures, and so when you have a translation that speaks to your language, your understanding, and by language I don't necessarily just mean like your ethnic language. I mean like the language of your culture. Like how I'm speaking right now is definitely not how they spoke in the 1800s, and there's probably a granny who's 91 who's going to be like, this young lady speaks too fast, and I don't understand her language structure and her use of grammar. There's a translation for you, ma'am, but now there's a translation. This is the Bahumi translation, and so then that's the this podcast is the Bahumi translation, and then you get various translations of the Bible that can speak to various people. So the beauty of having all these translations can give you better understanding and deeper understanding of what these things actually meant. And so my favorite translations right now are the Amplified for various reasons. We'll talk about it another time, but it's probably in the word. It amplifies the original language it was spoken in, meaning it takes the very word and then gives you its actual meaning and not just direct translates it. Is the Amplified and the Message. Message is like my girl. Message is like my boy. Message speaks it like, it gives you the point of the passage. Not the direct translation, but it gives you exactly what the point was. And the Amplified says this. So this is Ecclesiastes chapter 1. The words of the preacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem, right? Like I said at first, I read in the translation before, meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. This is what the Amplified says. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, in exclamation marks. All that is done without God's guidance is vanity, futile, meaningless, a wisp of smoke, a vapor that vanishes, merely chasing the wind. When I read this years back, I read it and I continued reading until the very end of the book, 5 chapters, very short. And I got to this conclusion by the time I reached the end of the book. But I love that the Amplified puts this in the very beginning, like from jump, right? That by meaningless, by purposeless, it's not to say that the thing itself, the creation itself, the being itself, you, have no meaning. It's not to say that life has no meaning. Why would God create something that has no meaning? You don't create things for the sake of creating things. Nobody does that. To be honest, you may think that, that's not necessarily true. Even if you said, I just did it for the sake of doing it. No, there's something that you're feeling there. Even if it's an internal, subconscious thing. There's something that you're feeling there in creating this thing, in writing this thing, in saying those words. There's some meaning there. But it's what you connect that thing to that, I want to say, qualifies the weight of that meaning. Qualifies its actual meaning. Remember, one thing about God is that he doesn't define things as they are. He defines things as they are to be or as their end. Does that make sense? I'm going to say that again. God doesn't necessarily define things as they are, as in currently, for example. He defines things as they ought to be or at their end, how they are in the end. So, for example, in the beginning, he says to Adam and Eve, if you eat from this tree, you will surely die. They eat from this tree. A lot happened. But did they die? Physically, perhaps not. Not yet. But now they introduce death into humanity. They introduce death into our existence. We were mortal beings. We were supposed to live forever. In our physical selves, we were supposed to live forever. When they ate from that tree, they died, as in they introduced death. As in, like, God now said, you are dead. You are as good as dead, pretty much. And then not only that, they died spiritually. Now their spirits were still kicking. They were still alive. But they didn't have eternal life because they had lost that I want to say that connection, that grace that they had with God, that sinless nature, that godly nature that is eternal when they decided to sin. So God called them dead from jump. And I say that carefully. There's context to that. But God was just like, you're dead now. You're pretty much dead. Hence, the only thing that can actually give us life is himself. Because he is the only thing that is not dead. He's the only being, the only that is not death. So God calls things as they actually ought to be or as their end, right? So if God says that something is meaningless, if God says that life is meaningless, what is he saying? He's saying that unless that thing is connected to true meaning, to what meaning actually is, not just for its surface level purpose, if I can put it that way, not just for the purpose that we maybe see, but for the bigger scheme of things, for purpose itself, for the purpose that God ordained, pretty much, then it doesn't have actual meaning. You know? Which then begs the question. This is a conversation that I once had with someone. The point of our existence here. We'll get into like life and things like that, but now let's just talk about ourselves as being. What is our point? Where do we find meaning? Where do you find meaning? We ask the question, what was I made for? And sometimes, sadly, you get to people who come to the conclusion that they have no meaning, that they have no point to their existence. That purely because they haven't found it or circumstances seem to vouch for the fact that they are purposeless, then they must be purposeless, right? And then you get people who think that they found meaning, but they find meaning in futile things, in vain things, which is what this book is saying. Not to say that the things are bad, not to say that the things themselves are problematic, you know. But many times we found our meaning, our being, in fickle, ending vapor. Excuse me. We found the purpose of life in vapor. And so easily. Oh my God, so easily. So easily. The systems, conditioning, all of it has kind of just gotten us used to this rat race, this cycle of just falling into false meaning. Oh, I must find my meaning in my career. Oh, who are you? Oh, I'm an actress. Oh, that's who you are? Excuse me? That's who you are? Or I'm a lawyer. Oh, so tell me about yourself. Well, I'm an advocate. And like, do you see? And I'm not saying, again, I'm not necessarily now saying, oh, now, Bahumi, what are you saying? Are you saying that as soon as I jump into a conversation, I must just jump and be like, oh, well, this is who I am, and I get deep-seated? I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not saying that there's a problem with that either. But what I'm saying is, at the core of it, when you say that that's what you do you believe that that's who you are? At the core of it. Like, I can easily say, if you ask me, who are you? I can be like, oh, I'm Bahumi. But do I believe that that is who I am? What does that mean? At the core of it. Me, myself, and I, when I'm speaking to you, I can give you all the surface level answers. But what matters is who I believe myself to be, because that's how I'm going to present myself as in the world. That's how I'm going to walk in the world. That's how I'm going to approach things and people in the world. Because to be honest, if I'm walking around in the world and someone asks me who I am and I say I'm an actress, to be honest, I'm not going to function as an actress in the world. That was just for the purposes of answering the question, to be honest. That was just for the purposes of just, I don't know, making conversation, just chatting. Or maybe just eventually getting to those questions. But it was just to give you a glimpse of what I do. But I don't operate in that way. But if I don't find out who I am, then I can't operate or function as who I actually am. So where do we find meaning? Do we find meaning in meaningless things? That's what God is talking about here. That actually everything that is, everything is meaningless. Isolated, on its own, it's actually meaningless. Acting on its own is meaningless. Lawyering on its own is meaningless. Because you don't function in the world as a lawyer. You don't. At your job, you do. But you were born, you were just born as you were born as a baby. Who is that? Who is that, and how do we find them out? Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All that is done without God's guidance is vanity. We're going to talk about the vanities of this world as time goes on, as we unpack this, just to really get you to see how far conditioned you were into meaningless things, into meaningless vanities. Maybe your vanities or your meaning is in money, is in wealth. And again, it's not bad. It in and of itself is not bad, but isolated it is. But the answer to its meaning is found in this very bracketed place. Without God, without God's guidance, without your Creator, your life can't have true meaning. And I know that's hard to hear for some other people. They're like, yeah, but I'm still functioning without Him. I guess you may probably go watch the first episode for us to really know whether you're functioning without Him or not. Because you're breathing here because of someone. So already, just because you're not conscious of it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're functioning without Him. You're just functioning without the consciousness of Him. And I think that's where we lose meaning, because we've lost consciousness of where our meaning actually comes from. We've decided to search for it in vain things, in futile things, in vapor things. And literally, it's like this. We don't care about this stuff, guys. We don't. Like, we may think we do. But we actually don't. Who cares about who lived 100 years ago? Who cares, really? Don't you think that the one who actually cares most about you is the one who created you? And whether you know who that person is or not, does it not matter for you to at least know who, or at your level maybe, I don't know what level you may be at, what that is? Wouldn't you want to know? Because that's where true meaning is found. No one gets to decide the meaning of an iPhone but Apple. I don't get to decide that. I can use the iPhone, but I can also misuse the iPhone. And I think even worse than misusing the iPhone is using it, oh my God, using it at the bare minimum of its capacity. I have a lot of people who always say to me, and I think we all say this, I think at some point I've said this as well, but immediately I was convicted. I was like, oh my gosh, why is the iPhone so expensive? Why? It's so, oh my gosh, 30,000, 40,000 rand, it's a lot. It's a freaking lot. It is a lot. It is a lot. But is it? Think about what it provides you. I'm not a tech wizard. I'm sure some people can say, you can get the same thing for other prices or whatever. Let's just stick with the example. Okay, you get my point. Okay. We can look at the iPhone and be like, man, this thing is expensive. But think about the mobile computer you are carrying in your hand. Think about the software you're carrying in your hand. Think about just, oh my God, everything you can do. You are literally walking around with a hacking, communication, calculating, and I'm literally just like spitballing all the surface level, I want to say, layman person uses of this thing. It can do so much. This is literally like a technological genius in your phone. And then I can speak to it and tell it to do things for me, and it does it for me. You know what I mean? Like I'm working with the motherboard, with a mobile motherboard in my hand. And then I'm like, oh, it's so expensive. Personally, I think that is what God sees with humanity when we find meaning in meaningless things. I personally think that when God looks at us and sees how we have just been so consumed, so conditioned, so, yay man, discombobulated, just so deceived by the enemy, by all these vanities, that we found true being in having them or being them, when we are not them. We are who He created us to be. And who that is found only in personal relationship with Him. Personal. Now, He can give you the bare minimum of who you are as a human being, what you're supposed to do, what He did for you on the cross. You know, when He died for your sins. Because we messed up. We really are a messed up bunch. Were, if you're a Christian. And I don't say that obnoxiously. I really just mean, I could not have saved myself. I was a mess. I don't want to say I'm a mess because that's like shame. He died for that. I can't be like, he died for this person just for me to call myself a mess. How? But it's like, I've received Him now, I've accepted Him. It really is just a gracious act that I've received. I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much, because I really would have been such nonsense without you. I'm not saying that you are nonsense, but I personally, let me talk about myself. I would have been nonsense. I would have been meaningless. I would have been meaningless. And I say that carefully. I'm not saying that there isn't a cry in you, if I can put it that way, a spirit, a soul in you that has meaning. What I'm saying is that it's disconnected from its true source of meaning. It's like, if I were to take this plug point, you guys don't see it, but if I were to take up this not the socket, what's the thing? What's the actual thing that you put inside? The socket? Whatever, man. The plug. No, the thing that you put inside the socket. So you see the light, right? You get a light and then you get the cord and then the thing at the end, that red thing. Yes, that.
The power plug.
Okay, fine. The actual plug, right? Y'all forgive me. Fine. If you were to take the plug, right? In and of itself, it's not to say that it doesn't have meaning, but it's not connected to its true source of meaning. It has potential, if I can put it that way. You have potential for meaning. You are not completely meaningless. But your meaning, your being, cannot be truly exercised. It cannot be truly manifested without being connected. And once you're connected, oh my God. So with that in mind, I want us to explore this chapter and this book, because I really believe that it is such a balanced book in and of itself. I've once heard someone say that the Bible is probably the most balanced book that they've ever come across. It was actually Trevor Noah who said that. I try not to give him a shout out, but we'll give him a shout out if he even watches this. But it's, I personally believe that this book, the book of Ecclesiastes, is probably, I haven't read all the books, but in my opinion, it's probably one of the most balanced books, if not the balanced book in the Bible. Because I feel like it so greatly validates the person who's still questioning, not understanding, seeking from a position of maybe not knowing God or understanding God or even understanding the Christian belief. Even if you are Christian and you are that person who doesn't understand that, yet at the same time, it brings the practicing Christian to deeper revelations of existence, and maybe validates your questions as well. And I think that it probably even just grows your relationship with God and with your being and with existence here on this earth. I think it gives you a better understanding of your position here as a person and God's position as God, as the creator of all beings. And I think that with that connection, we'll be able to become or live easier, knowing and understanding whose we are, and thus who we are. Alrighty, I will see you in the next episode as we further unpack the book of Ecclesiastes. I'm so excited to read this chapter. I'm so excited. Yeah, I'm so excited to read this book. And I think that you will be too. You'll love it. You will love it. It will literally be like a girl kikiing with you and, having tea and whatever, just chilling, having drinks. And your boy just being real with you. I'm gonna say your boy just being real with you. But I was like, nah, I don't speak like that. I don't do that. So yeah, let's explore the book of Ecclesiastes. Read it before you jump onto the next episode, if you will. Very short, and then it will just give you a better expansion. And we are going to read it in the Amplified and the Message. And I promise you, it's just going to be a ride. Oh, you are just going to die for, so you can live. Bye guys, leave me alone now.